Between 1642 and 1651, the kingdoms of England, Scotland, and Ireland were shattered by a series of brutal internal conflicts. While the fighting tore families apart, it also served as the violent birthplace of the modern professional military. At the center of the collapse was King Charles I. He was a man of deep convictions, specifically the divine right of kings, the belief that his authority was granted directly by God and remained beyond the reach of his subjects. This sat in direct opposition to the growing power of Parliament. To the men in the House of Commons, true authority in England was rooted in the control of property and the legal right to grant or withhold taxes. The deadlock turned into a rebellion when Charles attempted to force Anglican religious practices onto the Presbyterian Scots, leading to a famous riot here at St. Giles Cathedral in Edinburgh. Because the English Constitution lacked a clear way to mediate between a king and a parliament that both claimed absolute power, the political process collapsed. Physical force became the only way to determine who actually controlled the three kingdoms. When war broke out in 1642, both sides faced a massive hurdle. England did not have a standing, professional national army. To raise soldiers, the king and parliament relied on the wealth and influence of regional nobles. These aristocrats used their own money to recruit and equip local men, often drawing from regional militias. This was the Gentlemen's War, a struggle led by passionate amateurs. These nobles brought their own private retinues to the field, motivated as much by personal glory as by the political cause. This reliance on the nobility meant that soldiers often felt more loyalty to their local lord than to a central command. There was no standardized training or unified discipline, making large-scale coordination nearly impossible. Assembling armies of glory-seeking amateurs created a volatile environment. It resulted in a conflict that was as uncoordinated as it was devastating, setting the stage for a long, bloody stalemate. The Battle of Edgehill was the first major test for this amateur system. On the Royalist wing, Prince Rupert utilized modern shock tactics. His cavalry charged at full speed, shattering the parliamentarian lines on impact. Then the amateur flaw emerged. Instead of helping their infantry, Rupert's horsemen abandoned the field to loot the enemy's baggage train. With the cavalry gone, the infantry was left to a grueling, unsupported brawl. By the time the horsemen returned, thousands lay dead in the freezing night, yet neither side had gained a strategic advantage. Edgehill proved that individual gallantry could not win a war. The lack of central discipline turned what should have been a royalist victory into a grinding national deadlock. 2 years later, after the war had descended into a series of uncoordinated raids and disease-ridden sieges, the armies met at the Battle of Marston Moor. The same aristocratic habits still plagued the royalists. On one side of the field, their cavalry repeated the mistake of Edgehill, breaking their formation to plunder the enemy's supplies. It was a clear model for tactical victory, though the broader parliamentarian leadership remained slow to adopt it. Despite the localized success at Marston Moor, the wider parliamentarian war effort remained paralyzed. Command was still split between rival aristocrats, who were often more interested in political maneuvering than in military results. This divided leadership led to a catastrophe at Lostwithiel, where Parliament's entire infantry force was trapped and forced to surrender because their aristocratic generals couldn't coordinate an escape. To men like Cromwell, it was becoming obvious that the old feudal structure was incapable of winning the war. To defeat a king, they needed a military system that was a tool of the state, not a collection of private estates. They realized that as long as the army was led by men chosen for their social rank rather than their skill, the war would never end. Ultimate victory required a total break from the Gentlemen's War. In early 1645, Parliament passed the New Model Ordinance, a piece of legislation that changed the nature of the conflict. The ordinance forced members of Parliament to resign their military commissions. This legally separated political status from military command, finally removing the incompetent nobles who had stalled the war effort. The result was the New Model Army. Under Sir Thomas Fairfax, it became a full-time meritocratic force where officers were promoted for their performance on the field rather than their family tree. This professional force quickly proved its worth. Within months, it dismantled the king's remaining armies at Naseby, ending the military deadlock and leading to the eventual execution of Charles I. The war ended the absolute monarchy and replaced private, aristocratic retinues with a professional military answering to the state. Warfare became a specialized vocation, defining the defense of the British Isles for the next century.